Hello friends, greeting from this side. I am happy to be online again. I hope that everybody is fine. Now friends, today I am going to speak on the first farmers of South Asia, and we are going to discuss in detail about the work that we have done on the first farming community of Mewar region in Rajasthan. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizers, particularly the Adventure in Archaeology group, and also the director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Colombo, Indian High Commission. Welcome all of you. Now, friends, this is a very important topic post archaeogenetic research that we have done, and I am developing a model now for the dispersal of the early farming communities in South Asia. Now, as far as the transition is concerned, I think there are a lot of anthropologists and sociologists who have indicated that if the situation is ideal, people prefer to lead hunting gathering way of life as it provides more luxury and agriculture is considered to be the last option. Now, ideal condition means you in a given what we call as the catchment area, there should be sufficient natural resources available for the population. Every catchment area has a carrying capacity, and that carrying capacity supports certain number of people. And if the number increases dramatically, then the natural resources available in the catchment area are not sufficient, and in that case, people are forced to adopt different subsistence mode, and therefore, from hunting gathering to agriculture, perhaps this particular situation may have arise in different parts of the world, including South Asia, and it is also believed that the population pressure may have led to the development of agriculture. Now, the advantage of the hunting gathering stage is that you don't have to really work throughout the week. You can collect sufficient amount of food grains and other essentials in 2 or 3 days, and rest of the days in a week you can enjoy. So that is how you can have luxury impact in the hunting gathering stage. And all over the world, in fact, the hunter gatherers were forced to change their lifestyle from hunting gathering to agriculture at some stage. Now, in different parts of the world, the first farmers or the early farmers, they have been referred to as either Neolithic farmers or Chalcolithic farmers. But in South Asia particularly, these terms are used very, very loosely, and therefore we have to be really very careful in using these terms. And at some stage, we have to really discuss and come to an agreement about the use of the proper terms like Neolithic and Chalcolithic. So that needs to be done. Then, when it comes to the origins of agriculture, now we use two terms. One is domestication, and the other one is the cultivation. Now, these two terms are again, not properly understood. When we say domestication, that means there is a transmutation of the maybe plant or animal, which is not really happening. So what we are seeing in fact in South Asia and in other parts of the world, major parts of the world, is the transition in fact from hunting gathering to cultivation, not domestication as such. Now, as far as the origin of the agriculture is concerned, Gordon Child has made tremendous efforts in understanding this particular process. He has worked intensively in West Asia, particularly in the Levant region, which is supposed to be the most fertile units in the world. And he has stated it. Of course, his work was done long back in 30s and 40s. And that time, not much evidence was available outside West Asia. And therefore, he had made a statement that there is a nuclear zone of agriculture or nuclear zone of domestication in West Asia. And from here, people have moved to different directions. And one branch probably came to Indian subcontinent from here. So that was his hypothesis. But now, we have generated so much data, not only in South Asia, but also in different parts of the world. And it is becoming clear that there were multiple zones of origins and domestication. And certainly now the earlier hypothesis that the nuclear zone hypothesis now stands no more good. Now, what led to the development of agriculture, particularly in South Asia? Now, around 9000 BCE or maybe 11,000 years ago, the monsoon became very active. Two major climatic systems. One is summer monsoon and other one is a winter cyclonic system. They became very active. And as you know that we all are dependent for our agriculture on the monsoon system. So that become active, and that was a very important boost for the development of agriculture in this part. Then South Asia also has vast alluvium plains, particularly in the Balochistan part, in the Indus plain, in the Saraswati plain, and also in the Gangetic plain. And these plains were the vast agricultural fields, in fact, for the early farming communities. Then also we have the Piedmont areas, the mountainous area where there are a lot of natural resources available, which were exploited by the first farmers of this region. Then there are also other maybe ecozones like black wattle soil zones. Then we have very rich sea coast, deserts with minerals, and also a lot of grazing areas. Because of these favorable conditions, the agriculture or the domestication happened in part in the Indian subcontinent. And ultimately, how they grew, they developed a unique system for acquisition and distribution of resources, which led to the development of regional, intra-regional trade networks, economic competition, and more complex economic and political interactions. And the population pressure phenomena also was very, very active in the Indian subcontinent. When you look at the distribution of the Mesolithic sites, you realize that the entire Indian subcontinent or South Asia is occupied by the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. And Mesolithic is the phase between hunting gathering and settled way of life. So here, probably, because the situation in fact was favorable, and therefore perhaps the population was increasing in South Asia, which laid maybe tremendous pressure or constraint on the natural resources, and therefore perhaps people were forced to undertake agriculture. Now this map gives you idea. In fact, this I said that the monsoon became very active, and two systems, but the summer system, which covers the entire peninsular India, and also the part of North India and the entire Northwest India comes under the winter cyclonic monsoon system. And here, we know that the winter cyclonic monsoon system supports mostly the wheat and barley cultivation, whereas this summer monsoon system supports the crops like rice, sorghum, millet, and variety of oil seeds. So this system become very active, because of which probably the situation become quite conducive for the development of agriculture in South Asia. And the development of agriculture led to the development of settled way of life in this part. Now it has become clear from this chart. You can see that there were different areas where independent origins have taken place. In fact, in the Indus Plain, in the northwest part of the Indian subcontinent, we know that was happening. Then also in Mesopotamia, perhaps the date of the beginning of settled way of life is quite slightly earlier than the Indian subcontinent. But we do not really find that the influence is coming from Mesopotamia to Indian subcontinent, even though there was some kind of interaction between these two regions at some stage. Same was the case in Egypt also. Here also independent development of domestication and settled way of life was happening, and same is the case with China also. So in each area, we see almost independent origin of the settled way of life. And then, of course, we can see, the various other developments from maybe settled way of life to village life, from village to maybe city life. So that was happening in all these different areas. Uh, we have excavated number of sites in South Asia, and now we can identify at least two different zones of the origin of agriculture. The earliest one, of course, is in the northwest part of the Indian subcontinent, in Afghanistan, and also parts of Balochistan. There is a site called Mehergarh at the Bolan Pass, where we have the earliest evidence of settled life going back to 7000 BCE. And from 7000 BC to the Harappan culture, there is a constant development happening there. So we believe that, that this was happening independently, in fact, in this part. Uh, then, of course, the second oldest evidence come from the mid-Ganga basin, maybe around 6000 or 6500 BC. There also one can see the independent origin of agriculture and settled way of life. And third region is the Mewar region of Rajasthan, which I'm going to discuss in detail. And here probably the transition was happening, maybe around 4500 BCE, and by 4000 BC or 3900 BC, we see the development of village life in that part. As far as the major portion of central India, then Deccan and South India is concerned, so far we do not have any evidence of the independent origin. But what we are seeing, Pat, that there is an induction of maybe advanced technologies in this part, and probably those technologies have gone from the Harappan region, and therefore we see that there is more maybe interaction happening, and the influences from north and northwest was constantly going to this region, and that has maybe formed the development of village life in that part. We find rather more advanced village life in that part. We have very little idea about the east and northeast India, uh, but considering the material culture, it is quite likely that there is also maybe independent zone of cultivation of rice in that part. But so far we have not really discovered that, and we need really more maybe research in that part to understand this particular development. But whatever little research has been done, it clearly indicates the contact with the with mainland India, and also there is some cultural contact coming from the from China through Burma. So that type of evidence is found in different parts of South Asia. Now, the recent work done on archaeogenetic or DNA research that we have initiated. Now, that DNA has clearly indicated that around 12,000 years ago, it coincides with the development of monsoon system in the Indian subcontinent. So around that time, the hunter-gatherers broke into two groups. One went to Iran and one came to South India, South Asia. And the group which came to South Asia, now they in fact form a very distinct ancestor in South Asia. And these are the people who initiated the settled way of life and agriculture in parts of South Asia. Now, how it was moving in fact? The first farmers preferred mostly the alluvium plains firstly. So we find maybe some early settlements coming up in the Indus area, in Balochistan area, and also in parts of the Vindhyan and the Ganga area, the Ganga basin area. In the Balochistan part, of course, we have sites like you know uh, Mehergarh is there, of course. Then there are maybe half a dozen more sites in that part, which also indicate early developments in that part. And the beginning of settled life in that part is going back to 7000 BC. So the South Asians, in fact, who are developing the independent ancestry, they first probably developed agriculture in this part. And simultaneously, of course, maybe few people in fact went to the Ganga plain and in the Vindhyan region. And in Vindhyan region, there are a number of Mesolithic sites which have been excavated by Allahabad University. Sites like Koldiva, Mahagara, Mahada, uh, and number of sites which have provided very good evidence about the Mesolithic lifestyle in that part. And the same people ultimately from the Vindhyan region, they maybe started occupied slowly the plain area, and we have at least now 4 or 5 sites. We have where we have the quite early evidence about the beginning of settled life in that part. Laura Deva is perhaps the first site where this particular evidence was discovered. And now, of course, there are sites like Jusi, Hetabatti, Tokwa, etc., where we are getting the same kind of evidence now. So slowly, probably, from this part, from the northwest, people were moving, in fact, to the Ganga plain. And then, of course, they later, in fact, so this development was happening between 7,000 to maybe 5,000 BC. And then, of course, the people, they occupied part of the Mewar region. And in Mewar, where we have done the research at the site of Balathal and Gilun, the beginning of the settled life is going back to almost 4,000 BC in that part. And then, of course, slowly they started moving, spreading in the rest of the central India and Deccan part, and also in South India. And the evidence, in fact, in Malwa region, then in the entire Deccan region, including South India, is much later, maybe after 2400, 2300 BC. So slowly, this particular movement was happening slowly. And we can explain, why the the domestication or agriculture took place little late in the Deccan region or South India, because most of the Deccan region and South India is occupied by the black cotton soil. We find the tracks of the black cotton soil in that part, and black cotton soil has a lot of limitations. In fact, D.D. Kosambi in 1965, he wrote a very important paper in which he stated that perhaps agriculture may not have happened in the black cotton soil zone, and because of the absence of the iron plows, and the agriculture may have started only with the advent of the iron technology in this part. But that is not true, because when you see the distribution of the Chalcolithic sites, the first farmers in that part, in the Deccan region and also in Malwa region, they are called the first farmer, they are called the Chalcolithic farmers. And the first farmers in South India, they are called the Southern Neolithic people. So both in fact, this when we look at the distribution of their settlements, we find that most of the settlements are in the proximity of the black potted soil zone. That means the farmers, the early farmers, the first farmers, they may have exploited the black potted soil. They may have used that for cultivation purpose, and therefore we are getting the sites in their proximity. Only problem is that that you cannot grow surplus amount of food grains. Now, if you want to develop further, why the urbanization really did not take place in Malwa region or in Deccan or in South India as early as the Indus or the Harappan urbanization, mainly because in the Deccan region or in the black cotton soil zone, one cannot grow surplus amount of food grains unless one uses the iron implements or the iron plows, and that was not available for the early farmers in that part. And therefore, once the iron became abundantly available to the common people, then only the urbanization took place, maybe around second century or first century BC in that part. So this is how we don't know much about the eastern part, unless we have some evidence from that part, eastern and the northeastern part of the country. We cannot really develop a model for this part. But I am trying to develop this particular model of the movement of the maybe the first farmers in that part. So this is the situation, in fact, which I wanted to discuss for the first time with you. Then I come to the Mewar region. Why this region is so important? The general belief is that the entire Rajasthan is a desert part. That is not true, in fact. The Mewar region of Rajasthan is as fertile as maybe the Malwa Plateau or the Deccan region. And here, you can see, in fact, this is a part of the basin, the uh, Mewar basin, which is surrounded by the, this Vindhyan regions, uh, surrounded by the, Aravalli mountains, not the Vindhyan regions. And this part, the basin is very good for the agriculture purpose. Even today, this is a main area for agriculture. And there are a lot of natural resources available in the mountainous region, in the Aravallis. And the people who are settling here, in fact, they can exploit the natural resources which are available within the maybe catchment area or slightly away from the catchment area. And therefore, one can see a lot of settlements taking place in this part. It is not necessary that every early farming settlement is along the river bank. The rivers in this part are not perennial; they are semi-perennial. They do not really flow during the summer season. Therefore, have they do not really carry much importance. There are a lot of water bodies like this. There are a lot of lakes in Rajasthan, particularly in the Mewar region of Rajasthan, and a lot of settlements are found around these type of lakes. Now, this is of course this is a picture of the Pushkar, where the entire town is around the lake. Also, there are sites like Balagal, for example, the ancient Chalcolithic site, that is located in fact, near the lake. There is no river, nearby. The site of Girun, of course, is close to the main river. Now, this river is called the uh, this river is the Banas River. This is the Banas River, and we have located, in fact, number of sites in this part. This is typical vegetation found in this part, semi-arid region. And you can see now, as I say, that we have discovered number of sites in this part, in the small basin, in the Mewar basin, maybe around along the major rivers like Banas, Bedas, etc. We find number of settlements. and more than 100 settlements have been located so far. There is a scope, of course, as one carries out more investigation, one can discover more sites in this part. But this region was really thickly populated during the Chalcolithic phase or the early farming community phase, or the first farmers occupied mostly the fertile regions which are surrounded by mountains having a lot of natural resources. Now the archaeological research in this part began in fact in 50s. Sankalia from Deccan College. Now he carried out very extensive and intensive survey in parts of Mewar, and subsequently, of course, number of scholars followed, and they discovered number of sites in this part. But one of the major contributions of Professor Sankalia was the excavation at the site of Ahar. Now this site is very important because before the excavation at Ahar, it was always believed that the settled way of life in this part happened much later, maybe after 6th century BC. But with the discovery of the Chalcolithic phase at Ahar, the antiquity of the settled life was taken back by almost 2,000 years at, at one stroke. But what he found, in fact, at the site of Ahar, now the culture that he discovered here, the Chalcolithic culture, now he named that as Ahar culture. As keep mentioning that whenever a culture is identified at a place, that place name is given to the culture. And since the Ahar culture, the Chalcolithic culture was identified at the site of Ahar, it was initially called as the Ahar culture. Later, it was found that it was found most of the sites were along the river bank, river Banas. So sometimes it was called as the Banas culture also. But we prefer to call these as the early farming communities in this part. But what he found, in fact, he did not, or there was no early phase of Chalcolithic here. Maybe the developed phase of Chalcolithic was present at the site of Ahar, and it was dated. The beginning of that was dated to around 2,400 BCE. And Sankara thought, since the Chalcolithic people were quite advanced, he and many other scholars believe that perhaps the Harappans were responsible for the origin and development of the Chalcolithic phase in this part, because there was a lot of Harappan influence on the material culture of the Chalcolithic people here. And then, of course, there was a big lull. In fact, there was the research up to 60s was not really carried out on large scale in this part, and only 90s. Then Deccan College again, in fact, carried out thorough investigation in this part. We examined some already discovered sites, and we excavated some more sites in this part. The next site after Ahar, the next site to be excavated was the site of Balathar, which was excavated on a very large scale. And then, of course, we excavated the site of Gilund, and also took some fresh excavation at the site of Bagor. And then, these excavations have provided some new evidence about the first farmers in that part. We have got really, very interesting evidence about the origin and development of the first farmers in that. These are some of the, Mesolithic sites you can see. This is the site of Bagor, and what we are seeing at the depression. This depression was the part of the excavation that was done by Deccan College in 60s. In the lower picture, of course, you can see the site is located. This is River Kothari, one of the tributaries of River Banas. And you can see that this photograph was taken during summertime. There is no water at all here. But what is interesting here, in fact, on this part, this is the site of Bagor. The site is located here. And this site is surrounded by good agricultural land. Here you can see this is a really good agricultural land. And on the other side, you can see pasture land available. So very ideal location, in fact. On one side, there is a pasture land, which is required for their flocks of the animal. And on the other side, there is agricultural land available. So these type of strategic locations were occupied by the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers in this part. And in these two pictures, you can see that some of the sites are close to the source of raw material. You can see here the debitage is covering the entire site here. So there's a lot of abundantly available raw material also. So some of the sites are located near the raw material also, and you can see some of the very well preserved Mesolithic sites in this part. So we have really very good evidence about the Mesolithic phase here, and I will discuss about what is the importance of the Mesolithic phase in the development of the first farming community in that part. This is the close-up of that. This is the site of Bagor, and now you can see the entire river, quite big river, but semi-perennial river, flows only during the monsoon period. And here, of course, you can get good idea about the presence of very good agricultural land on this side. And the entire opposite bank is entirely, rocky area, which is good for the, pasture land. I'm just showing you the picture of the site of Ahar. Ahar now, of course, is in the middle of Udaipur city, but that time it was on the outskirts. And what is the importance of this particular excavation? Apart from the discovery of the Chalcolithic phase, Professor Sankara could excavate the entire cultural sequence starting from Chalcolithic up to the medieval phase in this part. So for the first time, the entire cultural sequence was made available for this region. So this is the importance of this particular site. Then this is the close-up or the rather aerial photograph of the site of Balatar. It's a small site, but we have found really very, very impressive evidence at the site, which I will discuss in detail. But what is important here that we have excavated, maybe the entire settlement of the Chalcolithic here, and that settlement looks exactly in terms of the maybe the layout. It looks exactly like the modern settlement here. The modern people have followed more or less the the ancient settlement pattern here. So that is really important. And I was mentioning to you that there is a huge basin here, which was a big lake here. So the site is located on the bank of this lake. And this site has provided really very good evidence about the origin and development of the Chalcolithic phase, which you can see later. Then the biggest site, the site of Gilun, you can see the whitish patch you see here. This is the entire site. The site is spread over an area of roughly 22 hectare, quite extensive, perhaps the biggest Chalcolithic site in this part. And now also you can see that there are two mounds. One in this map you can see, in the lower map you can see. This is mound number 1 and mound number 2. And you can see part of mound number 2 which is so intact. Some of the part of the site is so intact that there is no scratch on the site at all. And this was a tree which was, when we started the work, this tree was a very important landmark. But then today of course the tree does not exist because it got burnt down. But this is a very important site in this part, and here we had done a lot of excavation, so it has produced very good evidence about the development of the Chalcolithic phase. We also carried out the site catchment analysis for Balathal and Gilun, and we have discovered so many satellite settlements. The big settlements were always supported by small settlements, and there was always maybe interdependence. The big settlement was dependent on small settlements for certain supplies, and also the small settlements were dependent on big settlement for certain supplies. So that pattern is really very, very interesting, and we have got very good evidence about that site. So the goals and methodology. What is the goal that what was our goal of the research in this particular area? So we were interested in finding out the origin of the Chalcolithic Ahar/Banas complex in the Mewar region, because earlier excavation did not throw much light on the origin part. Then we also studied the cultural process from the early to late phase of the Chalcolithic. Then interaction between Chalcolithic, Harappan, and other contemporary cultures, maybe outside, the Mewar region, outside the Harappan region. Then the role played by cultures contemporary or even earlier in the development of the Harappan elements. Some of the elements of the Chalcolithic people in this part were adopted by the Harappans, uh, and I will show in fact now some which elements were adopted by the Harappans later. Then the Harappan cultural impact on the development of Harappanas complex is very much visible. That was also studied. We studied the socio-economic organization also. Our research methodologies were very simple. We carried out fresh exploration and excavation of the site of Balathal, Gilun, and Bagor. Now, Bagor was excavated in 60s, but then the excavation was in the middle part, which was highly disturbed. And later, in 2000, 2001, we carried out some fresh excavation, and we excavated a pure Mesolithic phase at the site of Bagor, and that has also given us good evidence. Then we studied the earlier excavated material from Bagor and Ahar also, and that has really helped us in identifying the cultural or the characteristic feature of the Ahar culture. Then study of the contemporary cultures such as Ganeshur Jodhpura, because there was a lot of interaction between the contemporary cultures, between Ahar and the Ganeshur Jodhpura culture, then Anartha, Padri and Prabhas Patan in Saurashtra region. And also we studied, the other Chalcolithic cultures like Kaitha culture, Malwa culture, and Jorve, because the Ahar people had contact with all these cultures also. So this was our simple methodology. The Chalcolithic people, the first farmers, they introduced. Some of these elements were introduced on their own. Some elements were introduced because of the contact with the Harappans. But we do find a lot of introduction of ceramic here, which was developed maybe independently in this part. Maybe the brick elements were perhaps adopted from the Harappans. We find a lot of terracotta art present here, probably local terracotta art. We find the evidence of the lime production. There are a lot of paste and faience beads found in this part also, which are locally produced. But on the typological part, we can see a lot of Harappan influence on there also, and a lot of evidence of the metallurgy, the copper metallurgy, gold metallurgy, and silver metallurgy. So these are some of the important pyrotechnics, crafts, which were introduced by the early farmers in this part. And the non-pyrotechnic crafts were agriculture. We find a lot of evidence of the architecture, and also we have got good evidence about the development of architecture in this part. Evidence of hydraulics, lapidary, making beads from stone, then the flint knapping, making maybe blade tools, then shell industry, woodwork, stoneworking, ivory, bone, and antler working, etc. So we have the evidence in this respect. Then I will just discuss first about the site of Giloon and Bagor. In fact, both the sites have provided very important evidence about the transition from hunting gathering to agriculture. Now here, of course, we excavated quite large area. This was one of our important areas of the excavation, and here in this part, we found the presence of the microlithic or the Mesolithic camp here. So we did excavate that Mesolithic camp, and I will discuss, what is the evidence from that. Then we had also small excavation here, some maybe the trial trenches in this part, some excavation on the other part of the mound, etc. So this, and then of course we also excavated the industrial area at the site of Giloon. You will see that evidence of that. So this is that section, in fact, about mound number one. Uh, a very thick deposit, 14-meter deposit we found on mound number one. And here it was not possible to excavate from top to bottom at in the central part. Therefore, we took this step trench. We started in the center part, and gradually our excavation shifted towards the periphery area. And we have found the entire cultural sequence, the entire history of Chalcolithic here, and also the history of the transition from hunting, gathering to agriculture. In the lowermost levels here, we found the Mesolithic phase. And this is little close-up of that. Now, what we notice at the site of Giloon was that when the Mesolithic people came here, maybe there was a lot of vegetation available here. So they cut down the vegetation, they burned down the vegetation, and this is the evidence of the burning of that. And on this, they established their temporary camp, temporary settlement here, maybe seasonal settlement. So this is the evidence of that. Then we find here, you can see from here down in this picture, there are two levels. This is entire from here to here, it is entirely Mesolithic phase here, almost 1.5 meter deposit. The Mesolithic phase can be divided into two parts here. One is that the lower phase, which is a ceramic. We find only the geometric and non-geometric Mesolithic tools here, whereas the same tool assemblage continue in the second phase. But along with the tools assemblage, we also find some crude and handmade pottery in this part. So we have divided, a ceramic and ceramic Mesolithic phase. And the ceramic Mesolithic, ceramic that we find here, the same ceramic continues in the Chalcolithic phase with some modifications and some use of advanced technology. So that evidence is found. Clearly, there's a transition from Mesolithic to Chalcolithic in this part. So that is very much visible. And these are some of the, why we say that the Mesolithic phase was a temporary or the seasonal settlement, because we do find these type of very flimsy structures. This is part of the circular structure that we have. Then we also have, you can see, a lot of well-made floors found here. So this is the kind of evidence which we get in the Mesolithic phase. I was mentioning that we have found some ceramic in the Mesolithic phase. The date of the ceramic is around 4500 BC. So these type of tools are found. Tools are made on locally available quartz material, and quartz is not a good material, in fact, for making or for producing long parallel-sided blades. But they have produced this type of blades on quartz, and they have of course made use of them. These are some of the cores that we found. And then of course, as I mentioned that we also find some potsherds. So these are the potsherds found in the Mesolithic phase. Again, you can see that they are very, very crude, handmade. The surface is not smooth at all. Little efforts in making some decorations on them. But this is the kind of ceramic that we find in the Mesolithic phase at the site of Bagor also, and also at the site of Giloon. So very, very important beginning of the maybe settled life, and how the settled life starts growing in pattern in this part. So that evidence is found here. And this is a section of the site of Balatal. And here the early phase, which was not really reported from any of the earlier excavated sites like Ahar. Even Ojiana, the site which is excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India in this part, that site also does not have the early phase, but Giloon and Balatal have the early phases. And this particular section has given a complete history of the Chalcolithic phase at the site. So the settlement was made on the on the rocky surface here, and the 1.5 meter deposit belongs to the earlier Harappan phase here. There's a very thick deposit of the what we call the middle Chalcolithic or the mature Chalcolithic, and the same phase starts declining. So we have the late phase also here. Interesting, the dates of the early phase, middle phase, and late phase, they perfectly correspond with the dates of the early Harappan, mature Harappan, and the late Harappan. So the early Harappan here is around from 4000 BC to 2500 BC. The middle is from 2500 BC to 1900 BC. And from 1900 to 1500 BC is the late Harappan phase. Sorry, late Chalcolithic phase here. So this is a very important evidence that we have found. And I mentioned that there is a very good evidence about the transition of the structures from very modest beginning to a well-planned settlement. So these type of structures, you can see plan of a half excavated circular hut here. There are hostels on the periphery. So this is how the Chalcolithic people began here, their lifestyle here. And then you can see at regular intervals, there are number of floor levels here. You can see these are all floor levels. And these floors belong to the rectangular or squarish mud houses, the nature of which maybe look like this. These are some of the mud houses from other Chalcolithic sites, but this is how the mud houses were built in fact after the circular structures. So this is the kind of evidence that we get in the early phase between 4000 to 2600 to 500 BC. The pottery that is found again in the early Chalcolithic phase is not that well finished. Again, it is handmade from here you can make out. But some of the typical Chalcolithic pottery of this region, particularly the black and red, painted in white, that was introduced right from the beginning. It becomes much refined in the middle phase. That is a different thing. But the characteristic feature of the Chalcolithic phase were developed in the early phase itself. Then the other variety called thin red slip. I will show you the classical thin red slip in the middle phase. And this is very important, the reserve slipware. I mentioned that the Chalcolithic people of this region have also contributed to the development of some of the Harappan elements. At Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, the excavators have excavated a few shards of the reserve slipware, and it was believed that this reserve slip has come, the elements of this reserve slip has come from probably from Egypt. That was the opinion of most of the scholars. But now we have found very good evidence about the origin and development of the reserve slip were in the Mewar region associated with the Chalcolithic phase. And this pottery that you see here, reserve slipware, the characteristic feature of reserve slipware is that it has got two slip of different colors. The first, is they applied thin wash of one color. Here, in fact, this color is slightly yellowish, and on top of that was applied slightly thick slip of other color. And then, of course, they scooped out some portion of that to make certain patterns. So this is what this is how the patterns are found on the reserve slipware. We did some scientific analysis on the reserve slipware, and it was clearly established that this reserve slipware is locally manufactured. And then, of course, when these people came in contact with the Harappans, probably the Harappans borrowed maybe some of these elements from them, or they probably imported this ceramic pottery from the early farmers of the Mewar region. And then, of course, we also see that one where which is close to the Harappan, but you don't see that the characteristic Harappan feature of that in the early phase. In the mature phase, of course, or the middle phase, you can see that. So this is the kind of evidence that we get in the early phase. So there is a transition in the maybe structural activities. There is also transition in the technology used for manufacturing ceramics. So this is a ceramic which becomes quite refined in the middle phase, which is uh, contemporary to the mature open phase. So the thin red slipware becomes much finer, entirely wheel made now. The raw material used is very fine. It is perfectly fired. You can see some of the typical black and red painted in white pottery, which becomes much refined. And this is the tanware, which looks now, it looks like Harappan. And there are some certain Harappan shapes also. The purported jar particularly, dish on stand, they are also found. So that indicates maybe towards the end of maybe 2600 BC, these people began to develop a very intensive contact with the Harappans. And they borrowed a lot of Harappan traditions, a lot of Harappan cultural elements, and that is reflected in the material excavated from number of sites. So we do find that evidence. So that Harappan influence is found on their settlement pattern. Firstly, now we find that in the middle phase, from 26-25 BC, the settlements are now fortified. We have uncovered part of the fortification wall at Balathal here. This is also part of the fortification wall at Balathal. And also at Balathal, of course, they have used mostly stone for construction because stone is easily available. Whereas at Gilund also we have the evidence of fortification walls. This is part of that. This is also part of the fortification wall. But here stone is not easily available. So most of the structures are made of either mud or mud bricks at the site of Gilund. But this particular feature is very important. And see the construction method, particularly in this particular respect. The walls are thick at the base and they taper out, upwards. So this is a typical Harappan technology and methodology which was adopted by its people, and that shows tremendous Harappan influence on the cultural elements of the Mewar Chalcolithic here. And now you can see that in the middle phase, the settlements really has grown now. Now, one feature which is not known is that outside the Harappan region, we always thought that that urbanization was never practiced outside the Harappan region. But from this evidence now, we presume that the Chalcolithic people of Mewar, they did, start the urbanization because most of the settlements. In fact, now you can see here. In fact, in this drawing, you can see that it is the settlement looks like typical Harappan settlement. There's got a street here, and then structures on both sides, and some of the structures are really very massive structures. So these are some of the elements which we find in fact in the cities and towns. So the Mewar Chalcolithic people, they began the development of urbanization, but somehow they could not reach that level as the Harappans reached. In fact, Harappans did, and perhaps therefore we prefer to call this as the maybe proto urbanization happening in the Mewar region. But this is very important. Outside Mewar region, we do not find these type of developments, neither in central India, nor in Deccan, nor in South India. So this was the only culture outside the Harappan domain, which made efforts, in fact, to develop from rural life to urban life. But somehow, because of lot of limitations, they could not reach that Harappan levels. But see, this is again a part of there's a structure called fortified enclosure. From this, you can make out a very thick, wall structure in the middle of the settlement here, and we can see the part of that wall, very thick wall, 8 meter on top, and almost 12 meter thick on at the base. And like Harappans, sir, at Dholavira you'll find these type of bastions were built for the fortification wall. So these bastions are also found here. So a lot of Harappan influence is visible on the structural activities here. So this is the kind of evidence that we find. And then we find, this is the fortified enclosure. We do not know what was the function of this because we did not really find any evidence to indicate the function of this particular structure. But then, we have, of course, this is a part of the fortification wall. We have some maybe dwelling area. There is street on, but on both sides there are some domestic structures here. So the settlement, though it is small, it is divided into maybe the manufacturing area, then it is in the residential area and the non-residential area. So that kind of evidence is found here. And same, in fact, in the same phase at Gilund, we have the same kind of evidence. much more maybe elaborately built structures, very very well made structures. But here, I just say that most of the structures are made of mud bricks only. All this is a very important structure that found. This is called the parallel wall structure, and we believe that this parallel wall structure is like a granary found at Harappa. So we also have identified this as a granary. There are a lot of underground these silos built by the Chalcolithic people here, and this structure is found from this part, very important part of the settlement here. So this is the kind of evidence that we get in fact in Chalcolithic phase. You can see again close-up of the street that was excavated part of the street, the very elaborate structures on this side and on this side, and some of the structures which are not really big and spacious found on the periphery part of the structure. Maybe this is the area which is occupied by not well-to-do people. And in this part, we find some evidence of the craft activities in this particular structure. Inside the structures, both in fact in Gilun and Balathal, we find very elaborate storage facility. You can see these are some of the silos of different shapes and sizes. And then, of course, you also have the double arm domestic hearth. This is the domestic hearth. This is also part of that hearth. So there are some structures which we call as the dwelling structures, which has got the storage facility as well as the cooking facility. So that evidence is very important. Then this is the evidence found. In fact, at Gilun also we have industrial area, probably for maybe copper working, because we have big furnaces here, and we collected the samples and we found the traces of copper in this in the samples. And this is the evidence of manufacturing of pottery from the site of Balathal. In the structure which I said that this is a structure for manufacturing purpose. So in that structure we found two pottery kilns and one above the other. This is the lower kiln. You can see they have built it properly. It's a closed kiln. They have used the bricks for construction purpose here, for making the chamber. And at the same spot, in the upper level, we have this another kiln. So this is also very important evidence. Not only it indicates a separate manufacturing area within the settlement, but the craft in fact was inherited from one generation to another generation. Maybe the father's occupation was continued by his son, and therefore we find maybe these type of evidence one about the other, same kind of evidence. So this is very important evidence that we get. So this is the kind of evidence, and this is the evidence which you generally get in cities. At in Harappan cities also, we have this type of evidence. Of course, Harappan cities were very extensive, very big. These are not that big cities, but we do find divisions of the different activities within the settlement here also. The close-up of with the you can see close-up of one of the domestic hearth, close-up of the pottery kiln, the lower and upper pottery kiln. This also. Now this structure is very important. We have identified this as a granary, a public granary. We are not really excavated it completely. It continues on this side, and we don't know because this part is eroded, highly eroded. Perhaps it continues on this side also, and also on this side, this part also eroded. But we found in fact in 12.5 meter by 10 meter, we find this particular complex. It is made of parallel walls, and the space between two is very small. And of course, but inner portion was plastered, and the floor also was was very well made. And inside we find even the thin layer of sand also. So probably they must have kept some maybe some bales of maybe goods inside, and in order to prevent it them from eating by white ants, they have used the sand layers here. Also, there are some uh, silos also. But this bit is very important. We found here a number of, for the first time, a number of clay ceilings here in this. These are all clay ceilings, and we can see beautiful impressions on them. And this is very important because this evidence has led us to connect this part with Central Asia. In the in Central Asia, the BMAC, Bacteria marginia archaeological complex area in Central Asia. Now we have same kind of patterns found in that part also. An earlier hypothesis was that the cultural influence came from BMAC to Indian subcontinent through Harappan region. But now, of course, this evidence, and that was dated to around maybe 24, 21, 21, 10 to 2200 BC. But now, this evidence is very important because this particular evidence is dated to around 2500 BC. And the evidence from BMAC is around 1900 BC or 2000 BC. That means, this concepts were developed here. And slowly, as through the Harappan region, it began to go to Central Asia. Sankalya, now when he excavated the site of Navratuli in Madhya Pradesh, he had formulated a hypothesis that the Iranians and the Chalcolithic farmers of Central India, they were well connected, by culturally well connected. But that time, in 50s and 60s, there was no sufficient evidence. And he was ridiculed because they say that there's so much gap, cultural gap, the chronological gap is there, and the spatial gap. So we did not have sufficient evidence that time. We did not have sufficient evidence from the Harappan levels also. But now we have a lot of this evidence from the Harappan levels and also from the Chalcolithic levels also. So now we know that how these, the cultural interaction may have happened between Iran and Central Asia, and between Central Asia and Central Asia and Central India. So this is this kind of ceiling was found with beautiful impressions on them. These are some of the patterns, floral patterns that you find on them. You can see the close-up of that. It's beautiful patterns. Maybe they have used some stamp in fact for making these. These are some of the elements of that, different patterns. And from the early from this first sorry. See, from this you can make out from this picture. Now, this is the opposite side of this, the other side of this, and it seems that that this is the lump which was used for closing the mouth of a pot. So you can see the impression of the rim portion of the pot here, and then once it is closed, then these stamps were put on that. So that means these ceilings, or this is the evidence of the trade activities that was undertaken by these people. These are the different motifs I showed you. Also, you can find a lot of Harappan graffiti also. Some of the letters graffitis are resembling the Harappan letters. So this is the kind of evidence that we get, indicating very close contact between the Harappans and the Chalcolithic people. But how the influence has gone from Giloon or from this part through the Harappan, Channudaro, in fact, there are some elements which indicate that similar motifs have been reported from the site of Channudaro. Then there is a site called Perak, and from Perak, of course, it goes to Iran and to Central Asia or to BMAC region. So this is how we believe that perhaps this is how the influence have gone from from the Chalcolithic to the BMAC region in Central Asia. So these are some of the elements which are found exactly same The impression of that was found at the site of Giloon. This is from Channudaro. More elements of that. Exactly same pattern is reported from the site of Giloon. This pattern looks exactly like the pattern found at Giloon. This pattern again you can see the decorative patterns from Perak. These are some of the sealings from seals from Perak. Some of the elements from Giloon, from Perak. So much similarity in fact between the motifs found in Giloon, at Chiran, at Perak, and Chandudaro. And these are some of the sealings, in fact, seals found or seal impressions found in the Chalcolithic levels here. And exactly same elements have been reported from the site of BMAC. So these are some of the elements of that. Of course, they are in different material, but the pattern is exactly same as the one found at the site of Giloon. Close-up of one of the stamp impressed. Some of the motifs, of course, found are similar to the one found at Giloon. This motif is very common at Giloon. And we do find these motifs printed on pottery in Balochistan also. Some of the molds. So earlier it was thought that this is the BMAC region. That the influence started moving away from BMAC to Harappan region, and from Harappan in fact to Central Asia. But now we have different hypotheses. We have the early evidence here in Central Asia. So from here it went to maybe came to Channudaro, Mohenjo-daro, and followed this route and came to the BMAC region. So this is very important, and this matches well in fact with our DNA research also. The DNA research also indicated that the Harappans came in contact with the people from Iran, and also from Central Asia, because in those central in Iran and Central Asian skeletal remains, you find the Harappan gene, but not their gene in fact in the Harappan skeletal remains. That means first we began to go out, and then of course they were coming in to Indian subcontinent. So this is the kind of evidence we are getting in fact in the Harappan levels. And then of course this is typical material. On this you can see a lot of, on the copper implements particularly, you can see a lot of Harappan influence. So the typologically they look exactly like Harappan implements. From the site of Kuntas in Saurashtra and Gujarat, we have similar copper implements. Then the axe found at the site of Ahar is again typologically looks very much similar to the Harappan axe. So this indicates a lot of Harappan influence. Even the beads are exactly, they look like Harappan beads. So there is a lot of Harappan influence on these. Some of the bull figurines found here, terracotta bull figurines. Some are maybe humped bulls, some are not non-humped bulls. And the other maybe these are some of the sling balls and the continuation of the blade elements in the Chalcolithic phase. So the degeneration is visible in the quality of artifacts like ceramics, which become coarse and carelessly decorated. Then disappearance of foreign goods like faience, turquoise, and lapis lazuli beads, with the increase in local stone beads or use of shell, which is traded with Gujarat. So this is happening towards the end of the middle Chalcolithic. This is what we are getting. And this is the beginning of the maybe decline phase of the Chalcolithic phase in this part, maybe late Chalcolithic. Then the large public architecture seems to disappear with reduction in settled area on the site and reduction in the size of private structures and use of wetland dock for smaller structures. So we see the increased use of wetland dock now for the structure building. Though the political power is still very much vested in the hands of chief, as is seen at Giloon with a public granary, though on small scale. Also, in this phase, the culture seems to expand itself into the Malwa region by occupying new territory or by intermingling with the local people of the region. So, towards the end, after maybe 1800 BC, 1700 BC, slowly these people begin to move towards the Chambal Valley in Central Asia, Central India. And now you can see that the decline is visible in their structural activities. The structures become very small, very fringy, and this is the kind of, even the pottery becomes coarse and handmade again. So that is, there is an overall decline in the structural activities and also in their material culture, which is, these are some of the structures from the, some of the fireplaces in the structure. But see the wetland of structures toward the end. This is of course burnt structure, but you can see even the pottery is so coarse from the upper part. Why there is a decline? Now we have a very good evidence about the climatic data from different parts of the world. So from Central Europe, we have this evidence from Rajasthan in India, from Tibetan Plateau, from Sichuan province in China, from Mongolia, Northeast China, and also from Manchurian plain of China. And everywhere it is indicated that around 4000 BP, 4000 or 4100 BP, the climate becomes dry. So that coincides very well, in fact, the decline of not only the Chalcolithic cultures here, but also some of the major civilizations of the world. The Harappan began to collapse at the same time. The Mesopotamians collapsed, the Egyptian collapsed, and so is the case with the Mewar Chalcolithic also. So the climate has played a very important role in the decline of the Chalcolithic culture. So finally, I will also talk about the major contributions made by our research in this part. So we have discovered the early beginning of Chalcolithic in the Mewar region, which is independent development happening in this part. Then we also have transition from hunting gathering from Mesolithic to Chalcolithic in this part. And now I have demonstrated the evidence in this respect. There are three phases of the Chalcolithic: early, middle or mature, and late, indicating maybe the cultural transition from early to maybe the most prosperous phase, and from prosperous to the decline phase. Then we have new architectural evidence, because type of structures that I showed from the middle Chalcolithic, you do not get this type of structures in other parts of India, particularly in the Chalcolithic phase. So we have the new evidence of that. Then we also have established contact with contemporary Chalcolithic and Harappan communities, which is very much visible and evident. Then cultural influence seen in their material equipment, that is also quite clear, which I showed you. Cultural interaction seen beyond Harappans with BMEC and Iran, that is also very much visible, very much evident. And decline coincides with the Harappan. Climate and the trade factor are the major contributors to that. So in brief, I tried to take this talk of the research that we have done in the Chalcolithic phase in Mewar region, and the Chalcolithic phase of Mewar has contributed immensely, in fact, to the development of the cultural elements, the development of settled way of life, and we have got very good evidence about the cultural process from the early stage to the decline phase of the Chalcolithic phase in that part. So thank you very much. I take this opportunity again to thank the organizers, and I thank all of you for your patience sharing. Thank you very much. Okay, there are some 4 or 5 questions that I would like to respond to them. One is by Bahata Ansumali Mukhopadhyay. She is asking, are there Indus seals among the materials excavated here? At none of the Ahar culture sites excavated so far we have found any evidence of the Harappan seal, proper Harappan seal. But as I mentioned that there is a Harappan influence on material culture, on their structures, including pottery. So there is a strong evidence about the contact between Harappans and the Chalcolithic people of this region. The other question is by Sachin Tiwari, and he asks, do we have a use of fire in flint knapping? We do not have, because we have not really excavated the workshop area of the flint knapping, and this type of evidence is likely to be in the workshop area only. We have found maybe tools in regular deposit, tools and some cores in the regular deposit. So far we do not have that type of evidence. The third question is by Silpa Wadekar. She asks, instead of Ambari excavation in Assam, is there any excavation which can point out the Harappan phase in northeast? No, we do not have any evidence of Harappan influence beyond Bengal. But we need to really recheck the material from the site of Ambari. Nobody has done that. And it is also she is also asking, in Assam there is a tradition of handmade pottery. Is it an indication of influence of Harappan culture? No, Harappan, this handmade pottery is made by Neolithic farmers, by Chalcolithic farmers also. So some of on some of the Chalcolithic cultures or Neolithic cultures we see Harappan influence, but it is usually the handmade pottery is independently developed also. So in this case, perhaps that the pottery found in northeast is probably there is no Harappan influence. Probably it is independently developed in that part. Does it mean Manvendra Pundir asked me, does it mean, sir, that Mewar Chalcolithic people got inspiration to develop urbanization from the Harappans? Probably, because around 2600 BC we get really very strong influence of the Harappans on the Chalcolithic culture of this part. So they have adopted a lot of elements from the Harappans. So they probably have learned these ideas and they tried to adopt in their settlements. So probably because of the Harappan influence, the incipient urbanization has happened in the Mewar region. And the last question is by Bhata Ansumali again. Were Indus inscriptions carrying seals present here too? No, we do not have inscriptions. We have some Harappan letters on potsherds and some other material. And some of the marking, they do not look like Harappan letters. Maybe they are simply some kind of potter's mark or graffiti marks. So we do not have proper evidence of inscription, Harappan inscription in this part. Thank you.